Hey everyone, it's Yasa Denji, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to a place that is often overlooked when we talk about the darkest corners of human nature. We're going to be exploring the stories of the top 3 most notorious serial killers in Asia. These are not just stories of crime, they are chilling accounts of individuals who left a trail of terror and grief that still haunts entire nations. The cases we'll be discussing today are deeply unsettling, involving individuals who operated with a level of brutality and cunning that is truly hard to comprehend. I want to give you a fair warning right now. The details in these stories are graphic and disturbing. We're going to delve into the minds of these predators, to understand not just what they did, but how they managed to evade capture for so long, instilling a deep-seated fear in the communities they preyed upon. Each story is a standalone nightmare, a testament to the fact that evil knows no borders. From the desolate farmlands of China to the bustling suburbs of Japan and the sun-drenched tourist trails of Southeast Asia, these killers turned ordinary places into their personal hunting grounds. So, I invite you to turn down the lights, get comfortable, and join me on this journey into darkness. And make sure you stick around until the end, because the final story we're going to cover is perhaps the most shocking of them all. It involves a man so manipulative, so charismatic, that he charmed his way into the lives of his victims before destroying them, earning a nickname that perfectly captured his venomous nature. You are not going to want to miss the story of the serpent. Our first story takes us to the vast, rural heartland of China, specifically to the province of Henan in the late 1990s and early 2000s. In these quiet, isolated farming communities, people generally knew their neighbors. Doors were often left unlocked, and a sense of communal safety prevailed. But that all changed when a shadow began to fall over the region. People started waking up to scenes of unimaginable horror. Entire families slaughtered in their sleep with nothing of significant value taken. It was a kind of violence so extreme, so senseless, that it felt like it had been unleashed by something not entirely human. The perpetrator of these horrific acts was a man named Yang Xinhai. Before he began his killing spree, Yang had a history of petty crimes, theft and assault that saw him in and out of labor camps. But somewhere along the line, a switch flipped inside of him. He developed a deep-seated hatred for society, a rage that he would soon unleash on the most vulnerable people he could find. He would travel from province to province on a stolen bicycle, a specter haunting the lonely country roads at night, looking for his next target. He preferred homes that were isolated, far from the nearest neighbor. His method was brutally simple and terrifyingly effective. He would break into these farmhouses in the dead of night, armed with whatever tools he could find on the property: hammers, axes, meat cleavers, shovels. He would then move from room to room, systematically murdering every single person inside, from the elderly down to the youngest children. The sheer ferocity of his attacks was what stunned investigators. The crime scenes were so chaotic, so drenched in violence, that it was clear the motive wasn't just robbery. It was about annihilation. The local police were completely overwhelmed. In rural China at the time, forensic technology was not what it is today. Yang was careful, often wearing new shoes and gloves to avoid leaving prints. The vastness of the area he covered, spanning 4 different provinces, made it nearly impossible to connect the dots. For years, these massacres were treated as isolated incidents, the work of local criminals or personal vendettas. No one could imagine that a single man was responsible for this nationwide reign of terror, a man the press would eventually come to call the monster killer. The fear he created was palpable. Farmers began barricading their doors at night, sleeping with weapons by their beds. The trust that had once defined these communities was shattered. Every stranger was viewed with suspicion. Every noise in the night was a potential threat. Yang Xinhai wasn't just killing people. He was killing a way of life. He moved like a phantom, leaving behind only devastation and a lingering question. Who was this monster, and where would he strike next? The police were in a desperate race against time to find him before he could wipe out another family. His reign of terror finally came to an end, not through brilliant detective work, but through a stroke of luck. In November 2003, police in Hebei province stopped Yang during a routine patrol because he was acting suspiciously. When they ran his information, they found he was wanted for rape in another province and arrested him. It was only during his interrogation that he began to confess, nonchalantly detailing a litany of crimes that left even the most hardened officers speechless. He admitted to 67 murders and 23 rapes across 4 provinces. When asked why he did it, his answer was chillingly simple. Killing people is very normal, nothing special. Now, we travel east to Japan, a country known for its order, low crime rates, and societal harmony. But in the late 1980s, the suburbs of Saitama, just outside of Tokyo, became the setting for a series of crimes so bizarre and grotesque, they would send a shockwave through the entire nation. It began with the disappearance of a 4-year-old girl. Then another. all young girls between the ages of 4 and 7 vanishing without a trace. A wave of panic gripped parents across the region as the horrifying reality began to sink in. A predator was stalking their children. This predator was a man named Tsutomu Miyazaki. On the surface, Miyazaki was an unassuming, quiet young man who worked a low-level job in his family's print shop. He was what Japan would later term an otaku, a person obsessed with manga and anime, often to the point of social isolation. But beneath this quiet exterior was a deeply disturbed mind, warped by feelings of inadequacy and a festering dark fantasy life. His obsessions went far beyond cartoons. He was consumed by violent pornographic horror films and the occult. Miyazaki's crimes were not just abductions and murders, they were elaborate ritualistic acts that fulfilled his twisted fantasies. After luring the young girls into his car, he would take them to remote, wooded areas where he would commit unspeakable acts against them. But his depravity didn't end with their deaths. He would defile their bodies, take photographs, and even keep body parts as trophies. He was living out the very horror films he was obsessed with, blurring the line between fantasy and a reality that was a nightmare for his victims and their families. What made this case even more disturbing was the way Miyazaki taunted the families and the media. He began sending letters, written under the pseudonym Yuko, a female name, to the victims' parents. These letters contained horrifyingly precise details about the murders, things only the killer could know. He even sent a package containing the cremated remains of one of his victims to her family, along with some of her teeth and photos of her clothes. It was an act of pure psychological torture, designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain and suffering. The investigation was one of the largest in Japanese history, but police struggled to find a lead. The killer seemed to be a ghost. He left almost no evidence at the scenes, and his taunting letters offered few clues. The media frenzy was intense, and the public's fear grew with each passing day. The case became known as the Otaku Murders, and it forever stigmatized the otaku subculture, painting them all as potential deviants. The pressure on the police was immense, as an entire country waited, terrified for the monster to be caught. The break in the case came in July 1989, completely by chance. Miyazaki attempted to assault a young girl in a park, but her father saw him and gave chase. Miyazaki fled, but in his haste, he left his car behind. When police searched the vehicle, they found a trove of horrifying evidence. Over 5,700 videotapes containing anime, horror films, and illegal footage of his victims. His apartment was even worse, a shrine to his dark obsessions. The arrest of Tsutomu Miyazaki brought a collective sigh of relief, but the details of his crimes left a permanent scar on the Japanese psyche, exposing a darkness many thought could never exist in their society. For our final and most chilling story, we leave East Asia and travel to the so-called hippie trail of the 1970s. This was a route that stretched from Europe through the Middle East and into Southeast Asia, traveled by thousands of young idealistic Westerners seeking adventure and enlightenment. They were often traveling on a shoestring budget, full of trust and open to new experiences. It was this very trust that made them the perfect prey for a man who was as charming as he was deadly, a man named Charles Sobraj. Sobraj was a master of disguise and manipulation. Born in Saigon to an Indian father and a Vietnamese mother, he spent his life feeling like an outsider. A feeling that fueled a deep-seated resentment and a desire for a life of luxury, no matter the cost. He was intelligent, multilingual, and possessed an almost hypnotic charisma. He could effortlessly blend in with the backpacker crowd, presenting himself as a wealthy gem dealer or a helpful guide. He would befriend his targets, gain their complete trust, and then he would strike. His method was insidious. He often worked with a partner, Marie-André Leclerc, who posed as his devoted wife, which helped to put his victims at ease. Sobraj would invite travelers to his apartment in Bangkok for a party or offer them a place to stay. Once they were under his roof, he would poison them, usually by drugging their food or drink. He would nurse them back to health, creating a powerful sense of dependency and gratitude. But this was all part of his game. Once they were completely weakened and isolated, he would murder them and steal their passports and money. He used the passports of his victims to travel across Asia, assuming new identities as he went. This made him incredibly difficult to track. If a French tourist went missing in Thailand, the authorities would be looking for a French man, not a Vietnamese Indian man traveling on a Dutch passport. He was a chameleon, a ghost in the system. The bodies of his victims, often young couples, began turning up in various locations across Thailand, Nepal, and India. They were often found drowned, strangled, or burned, making identification difficult. The press nicknamed him the Bikini Killer after one of his first known victims was found wearing only a bikini, but it was another name that truly stuck. The Serpent, for his ability to shed his skin and charm his prey before delivering a fatal bite. For years, Sobraj slithered through the cracks of international law enforcement. He was arrested several times for various crimes but always managed to escape, often through brazen schemes like faking an illness or drugging his own prison guards. His confidence was boundless. He seemed to believe he was untouchable. He reveled in his own notoriety, even giving interviews to journalists while he was on the run, boasting about his exploits. He wasn't just a killer, he was a narcissist who craved the spotlight, turning his life of crime into a performance for the world. His downfall was ultimately a product of his own arrogance. In 2003, long after his trail had gone cold, he inexplicably returned to Nepal, one of the few countries where he was still wanted for murder. It was a baffling decision. A journalist spotted him in a casino in Kathmandu and alerted the authorities. He was arrested for the 1975 murders of 2 tourists. It seemed the serpent had finally been charmed by his own legend, believing he could walk back into the lion's den without consequence. His capture ended one of the most bizarre and far-reaching crime sprees of the 20th century, but the legend of Charles Sobraj, the charismatic killer of the hippie trail, continues to fascinate and horrify to this day. And there you have it, the stories of 3 of Asia's most notorious serial killers. From the brute force of Yang Shinhai, to the bizarre rituals of Tsutomu Miyazaki, and the cunning manipulation of Charles Sobraj. Each case reveals a different facet of human evil. These stories serve as a dark reminder that monsters are not just figures of folklore, they walk among us, often hidden behind ordinary or even charming facades. Their actions leave behind scars that never truly heal, changing not just the lives of the victims' families, but the very fabric of the societies they terrorized. It's a heavy topic, I know, but I think it's important to tell these stories, to remember the victims, and to try and understand the darkness that drives people to commit such terrible acts. The world can be a frightening place, and the tales of these 3 men are a stark testament to that. They preyed on the vulnerable, exploited trust, and left a legacy of fear and sorrow that echoes to this day. Thank you for joining me on this difficult journey, and for listening to these important, albeit terrifying accounts. If you found this video compelling, or if it made you think, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into true crime stories from around the world. Your support really helps me continue to bring these stories to light. And I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Which of these 3 cases shocked you the most? Was it the monster killer, the otaku murderer, or the serpent? Until next time, stay safe and be aware.